morning, everybody. Hi, Ajay. Thank you for being part of Open Minds 11. And as you know, today we have a very illustrious speaker, somebody who has studied around 100,000 people in 400 corporates and also been awarded the Entrepreneur of the Year award. So we have Muralidharan, who's going to be talking to us both the sides, as an employer and as an employee. What are the challenges and what are the strategies that I hope that it's going to be a very good session for everyone. So let's start, Murali.
Thank you, Turab. I'm going to share my screen. Is my screen visible?
Yes.
Okay. See, the topic Turab has asked me, or we discussed and agreed on to discuss today, is on employment challenges. I think the key issue in any employment challenges, you can't talk about employment without looking at the country as a whole. In fact, we should look at the global scenario as a whole. But that's too big a topic to pick up for today. So the topic is actually broken up into 3 parts. Coverage is about 8 myths about Indian employment. I'm going to speak about these myths. Some of them are interesting for you to know. Many of them are counterintuitive. The second, 4 big solutions for employment creation. These are my ideas. Obviously, they're open to challenge. Third part is about employers, who are employers here. What is the future of human capital management? What does it mean for human capital management for employers? And 7 mega trends for employees. What does it mean for employees? So that's the 4 part in this presentation. The first 1 and 2 are about India as a whole. And I think we are in the crossroads as far as India is concerned. The COVID has really pushed us to the bottom in terms of economy, in terms of every single aspect, which we have, I think somebody mentioned it, we have pushed it under the carpet. Everything is now crawling above the carpet. Issues of infrastructure, issues of bureaucracy, judiciary, everything is on the top right now. So these are probably the most transformational time for India. And I'm a positive person. I believe that this could be a game changer for India, and therefore we could build something going forward from here. But there will be a pain. We'll discuss some of them. So I want to start off by saying that we want to conclude this with a positive note that these are going to be, we can build something on it for a great India. The 8 myths about employment. Myth number 1, India is in a great position to leverage our demographic dividend. So everybody talks about demographic dividend. It's supposed to last for the next 25 years. Every minister talks about youngest age group in the world, most of them less than 25. All this is based on some assumptions. Now let's examine those assumptions. Typically, when we talk about employment, we look at basically labor force. Labor force is how many people are looking for jobs in the country. And if you look at this foreign data, which is very interesting for you to see, as recent as 2018, this is the data of 2018, came from NSSO studies, only 475 million people out of 1.3 billion or 1,300 million people are looking for jobs. Now this unemployment rate at that time was 8.9%. Today they're talking about 24.5% right now, unemployment rate. Obviously, post-COVID, and there's a lockdown happens, unemployment rate will go up. It will go up to as high as 80-90% in some sectors. So that's not saying much. So I'm mostly focusing on what is the scenario before COVID for us to understand the trend and analytics. And therefore the COVID is a disruption, but COVID data cannot be the basis of any extrapolation. We should go back to some of the things that happened before COVID, and therefore our extrapolation should be based on that. The interesting part is the last line, not seeking work and not in colleges. 388 million people are neither in colleges, they are in the working age group. That means they can find a job, they are not interested in working. Now, this is the biggest, by far, our biggest challenge for India. So if you add the unemployed people, that is 42 million people are officially unemployed, plus 388 million people who are not looking for a job, but they are not in colleges either. 430 million people is our challenge for. This is the kind of youth They're all people from 15 to what we call working age group is called from 15 to 64. Now, what does it mean? The top summary is very clear. In India's working class, which is basically what I said, 15 to 64, 50% cannot work because they're either less than 15 or above 65. Out of the remaining 50%, 47% only are not working. That means only 25% of the population is working. Traditionally, we talk about dependency ratio. Dependency ratio is when you say demographic dividend, the people who are working will provide the economic benefits or economic income which will support the balance. Now, unfortunately, only 25% of the Indian population is looking for a job or working right now. And this is going to be by far our biggest concern as far as India is concerned. If at all, I would say one major complaint or disappointment I have with Modi government is that they've never addressed this problem seriously. Why are the youth not looking for jobs? Why there is such a huge amount of idle population sitting at home? So these are the biggest question, which we'll go back to this and some other thing. Myth number 2, youth are desperately looking for jobs. Again, that what I showed earlier was for the entire category of 15 to 64 age group, that is the working class. Now we've narrowed down the thing from the period 14 years from 2004 to 2018, that is 14 years period. In 2018, we are looking at a smaller age group, the age group of between 15 to 29. Now, interestingly, 18 million boys and 17 million girls are enrolled in higher education. It's a record for India. That means more and more boys and girls are going. Girls are almost equivalent to boys in colleges. Only 1 out of 2 boys and 5 out of 6 girls are not looking for a job in 15-24 age group. This is the serious worry. Now, 1/3 of the Indian youth between ages 25 to 15 to 29 are sitting at home. And in 14 years, 39 million graduates were added to working age population, but only 22 million are not looking for work. So across the board, we are talking about 3 categories. Across the age group of 15 to 64, across the younger age group of 15 to 24 or 29, and also the graduate segment. In all the 3 segments, there is a consistent trend of not looking for a job. The third myth we have is educate a child, save a family. This is everywhere we talk about girls should be educated. The assumption when you say about especially poor families, educated girls go on to work, earn income, and then lift the entire family, especially their own immediate families and their next family when they get married, they lift all of them above poverty line. This has been the narrative which has been told for a long time. But look at the data of the period 1980 to 2016. Clearly, the enrollment has gone up significantly. And the last column, if you see 2015-16, clearly you can see the number of enrollment has gone up. Enrollment ratio means what percentage of girls in that age group are enrolled in the primary school. For example, 100.7 means 100% of the girls in the age of up to class 10, 1 to 5, class 1 to 5 means up to age 10. All the girls up to class 10, up to age 10, they are enrolled in schools. If you see all the way down, the enrollment has been consistently going up from left to right. And even though enrollment is coming down as we go up from primary to secondary and tertiary, there is a big dropouts happening for girls in class 11 and 12. And also but in the higher education bracket, which is in the colleges, the girls are almost equivalent to boys. So clearly, girls are getting into schools thanks to RTE, and very big pressure from individuals, NGOs, societies. We have pushed a lot of girls into going to schools and colleges. But during the same period, say last 7 years, 3 out of 4 women coming into working age opted to be willingly unemployed. So the women are opting for unemployment more than the men, despite getting more educated. So that's a worry. Now, what are the women doing? We still have to figure out. There are some reasons we can speculate, but I have not seen any comprehensive research on this. Agriculture is losing jobs. You ask anybody, they'll say there is something called farm sector and non-farm sector. People keep on arguing that, the farm sector, is really losing jobs, and non-farm sector has to absorb the number of jobs. But this is exactly not true. If you look at NSSO data, NSSO is the most comprehensive, most reliable data, which has a large sample size. In India, we also publish, other organizations publish like CMIE, but their data is based on smaller sample. So one cannot rely on them significantly, but NSSO is the most authentic data we can ever get. Now, according to them, in the 14-year period, we lost 28 million jobs in agriculture. But if you really break it down into two lots of first 7 years and the next 7 years, in the last 7 years, agriculture has not lost any jobs. It actually gained 6 million jobs. Now, this is again a very contrary to all the narratives which you can hear of in any conversations on employment. Myth 5, wages are going over the roof. And this is the real cause of unemployment because companies cannot afford them, MSMEs cannot afford them. This is another myth that is going on. Now this diagram, which you see, the blue line, what you see on the top is called nominal wage. Nominal wage is what they get in hand. If you correct it for inflation, because there's an inflation adjustment in all wage salaries, these are the salaries paid to an average factory worker. Please understand, it's not for an entry-level worker, it's an average factory worker. What does this graph show? Over a 12-year period between 1999 and 2011, the average wage of a factory worker has remained constant. In some sectors, it has declined. And that is something amazing because this is contrary to what our anecdotal storytelling is. For example, real wages were stagnant at around 45,000 at that time. I'm talking about the study was done in 2018 based on the data available at that point of time. 50% of the industries showed a decline in real wages, but the managerial compensation went up by 150% to 480% of the worker salary. So what actually happened on compensation was all the managers were smart enough and they created a very interesting concept in corporate sector. It's called salary survey or a compensation survey. This basically brings in data of competitive companies and how much salary they are paying. And that has been one of the tools used to revise compensation. So managerial compensation went up significantly in this period, and that money went out of the pocket of labor. Now, this is the only one primary reason for this is because we are seeing supply more than demand. As you all know, compensation is an interface between supply and demand. Our demand for work has not gone up significantly, or new job creation has been very low, but because of the demographic reasons, we are getting more people coming into the age group, and therefore this excess of supply over demand has also killed the compensation. So 3 reasons have killed. First, the managers have usurped the money. Second, supply was more than the demand. And the third important trend was the decline and death of all organized labor unions. And if many of you may be in Bombay, you would be aware, textile unions, the Thurman time, there's a lot of wage negotiations to happen. There was a lot of pressure. All this vanished in the last 20 years. And therefore, we are seeing this trend. Now, on top of this, what I told you last case was that for people who are in the organized sector, because they're all average factory employers salary. But how much of that, even if you assume that this 25% wages remain a constant, but how many people are in the what we call as wage employment? Wage employment means there's a recurring income. They get either a piecemeal rate or a monthly rate or a periodic salary. Only 25% of the people are in wage employment. You see the data, 57% are in self-employment and casual employment is 18%. So 75% of the people are not getting a fixed income. So when we talk about COVID and lockdown, unfortunately, this data was never taken into account. A lot of Supreme Court cases going on now about employers having asked to pay salaries. This is only applicable for the wage employment category. 75% of the people not impacted by whatever Supreme Court judgment is. The Ministry of Home Affairs circular which came and said employers must pay salary. So this is another big mistake Mr. Modi did. All of us have done. We've not recognized that so many people are dependent on livelihoods on a day-to-day happening in the economy. And that's why we've been badly hit. The migrant labor issue has come because migrant labor have 2 constituents. One constituent who are employed in casual labor, and some of them are also self-employed. Many of them migrate in India for livelihood. So I think this composition is also important. I want you to keep in mind Whatever we talk about corporate employees, organized labor, they're a very, very small proportion of the total employment in the economy. As it is, people are not working. People who are working are also working, not getting the right kind of wages. Every one of them are vulnerable livelihoods they have. Now, in the 7 years, self-employment and wage employment has gone up. So if you see the composition of self-employment, how has it changed? Last time I gave you at a particular point of time. This is at the end 2017-18. If you look at the trend, you see clearly self-employment has gone up in the last 7 years. The first column is for 14 years. The second column is for the first 7 years. And the third column is for the last 7 years. So you can see clearly self-employed have gone up. Regular employment has also gone up and casual workers are declining. Now, this is a good trend. I think the Prime Minister announced in 2017, I think, about a special program to bring more and more people into organized work. And government is also planning a lot of legislation. It's called Code on Wages. There are 4 labor laws. They're going to bring it as code, and that will become more and more focused on organized labor. So that's a good trend. I appreciate that. Myth number 6, India should be focusing on manufacturing and construction sector to create massive jobs, right? Again, we'll examine this myth, whether it's true or not. If you look at 2017-18, where are the jobs? I mean, today the total employment is 100%. Where are the jobs? Agriculture is still holding 43% of the jobs. On the last column, you can see 43%. Manufacturing is holding 12% of the job. Construction is holding 12% of the job. The largest is service sector, which is basically trade and hotel, transport, other services put together. So when we talk about employment, everybody says increase manufacturing. Let us bring in more incentive for manufacturing. Manufacturing is not contributing to job growth or job distribution. So this is a particular point of time. As of today, 2017-18, if you take this is the distribution. Let's look at the trend. How the trend has been in the same sectorally, how the job sectors have changed. In 14 years, out of 60 million new jobs, 40 million came from service sector and 31 came from construction. But unfortunately, we lost a lot of jobs in agriculture in the first 7 years, though it has reversed itself in the last 7 years. Out of 50 million new jobs in the last 7 years, 31 million came from services. Only 10 million came from construction. And if you see, manufacturing has contributed 9 million jobs out of the entire period, right? So there is no indication right now to believe manufacturing directly leads to increase in manufacturing leads to job creation. Now, if you drill down further, agriculture is not losing jobs. Construction industry absorbed the job losses in agriculture in the first 7 years because the job profiles are similar. Many of them are unskilled and semi-skilled. So people who left agriculture came and worked in the construction industry. But construction has slowed down in the last 7 years. It's only 10 million jobs creation. Manufacturing has gained less than 0.7 million jobs per year. This is the truth. And politicians believe manufacturing can create as more jobs, which is a big suspicion. Service sector never gets the attention. Even in the lockdown period, the Prime Minister and others, all of them talked about essential goods, but they never talked about the importance of services. Right? Of course, they talked about hospitals as one of the essential services, but service industry only provides the job. Services include the common man who sells, for example, vegetables on the roadside. He's also a service sector guy, because he provides the service of trade and services is considered part of this. Investment in large enterprises created a large number of jobs. This is another myth which has been done partly because the Gujarat model, if you ask very honestly, Gujarat was the original capital of MSMEs in India. But lately, Gujarat has been the focus of large investments, including Reliance, Adani, Tatas. Many people have gone to Gujarat. And the Gujarat model was basically create large infrastructure, large capacity in refinery, automobiles, and so on. But if you really drill down and ask the question, how many jobs do they create? I took a sample in 2015 Vibrant Gujarat Summit. They presented the data. They are talking about investing about 2 lakh crores is what the commitment made by various companies which came and committed there. But they were supposed to create only 50,000 jobs, right? Which comes to about 4 crore investment per job. Of course, they are creating secondary jobs. Everybody will argue that there is a secondary jobs in logistics, secondary job in services around it. Yes, it could be 1:2, could be go all the way up to 1:3 or 4. But even then, it's a 4 crore investment per job. If you don't create this primary investment, this 4 crore investment you can't get the secondary and tertiary job growth. So the past data shows that large manufacturing investments created jobs only in the construction period. Because in the construction period, you have a lot of semi-skilled and unskilled people come in, erect the plant and machinery. But once the plant is completed, plants are automated. On top of it, the bigger problem with manufacturing is the attrition rates are very low. For example, in banking industry, we see attrition rates as high in some of the job roles as high as 100%. In manufacturing, even in the factory workers especially, the attrition is a very, very, very small number. So manufacturing does not create jobs on the operation side, and whatever it creates is a one time. It's not a perpetual job creation like service industry does. Myth number 8, we need to enroll more graduates. I think the last policy of the government of India, the Ministry of HRD, recently did a new policies on HR or new education policy. They have always been talking about increasing the enrollment ratio for graduates in this country. Now, this is a study done by me some time ago about where are the jobs. And this one was taken out of a very important survey done by NSDC some time ago. And we tried to project which are the jobs in that are relevant for graduates. If you see, the sectors are there on the left-hand side, followed by demand for graduates and postgraduates at entry level in the organized sector. So this is the data for only organized sector. Obviously, we can add something more for non-organized sector. But look at the job creation. These are the jobs where graduates have a competitive advantage over non-graduates. So that's what we mean by graduate jobs. If you look at them from this period 2013 to 22, 9 years, the total number of graduate job demand is going to cumulatively increase from 4.6 to 7.6, so 3 million over approximately 9 years. Now, what is the point talking about graduate enrollment? What is the point talking about? So when more and more graduates actually are getting passed out, we are approximately 5 to 6 million graduates are passing out, including diploma holders. And we are not creating even 500,000 jobs per year, which will give them the advantage of that kind of a job. So this is it. So today what happened, graduates are applying for non-graduate jobs. You all know about the caselets of many of the people applying for postman jobs. People are applying for security jobs. You've got a lot of people now, stories are bound with graduates and postgraduates and even engineers are taking security jobs. So we have talked about 8 myths. The whole idea of establishing the myth is to say that any solution that we build should acknowledge and recognize these problems, because you build any solution without that recognition of the 8 assumptions, we will have a problem. So the 4 solutions I'm presenting now are largely based on my belief that this could be big and they could bring about some fundamental change in the employment scenario. Now let's look at, before we go on to the solution, the question is, how many jobs do we need to create in this country per year? Every year we know that X number of people come into the age bracket 15, and some of them go out of the age bracket 15 to 65. So this exercise was done recently by me, and it's also supported later on by third-party analysis. But what it says is that we need to create 13.4 million jobs every year if we have to stay the current level of unemployment. As it is, unemployment is very high. As it is, not many people are looking for jobs. And on top of it, we need to create 13.4 million jobs per year if you really want to sustain the level of unemployability right now. Unfortunately or unfortunately, World Bank also confirmed the same data, 13.4 million. And their estimate, they did some correlation between what is the percentage of growth GDP should grow if you have to create 13.4 million jobs. They said 18% per annum should be the GDP growth over a sustained period of maybe 15 to 20 years. First, to absorb these people and also absorb the backlog of people who are already in the job market who are not looking for jobs or unable to find jobs. Very, very difficult to achieve. So we cannot, we're not talking about COVID. Even without COVID, we'll be very lucky if we're able to get somewhere around 5% to 7% growth per annum. And we talked about doubling to $5 trillion economy. Even that also is nominal rate was 12%. But if you talk about real rates of growth, net of inflation, which was around 7 to 8%. 18% is impossible. So we cannot, the traditional model is grow the GDP, jobs will come, people automatically will get jobs. This is the biggest bullshit which I've heard. It is not working. It is not true. And therefore, first is we have to change our strategy from investment, high investment. I already talked to you about high investment in big, large projects. Yes, we need large projects also, but we have to balance it out with labor-intensive MSME growth strategies. Now, this is a jargon. MSME Minister talks about it. We need to help the MSMEs grow. But if you look at it very honestly, the MSMEs are in deathbed. Many of them are struggling today for liquidity, and the COVID has hit them much harder than the larger companies, because they've historically MSMEs in India have not built as large cash surpluses to run the way large companies have done. And they don't have access to capital market. Many of them don't have access to debt from the organized sector. So combination of all of them, they've been operating on very low cash reserves, and therefore the COVID has also hit them very high. So if you want to focus on labor intensive MSMEs, what do we do? First, we need to recognize a concept called employment elasticity. And you see in the graph in figure 1, basically you've got two countries, India and US, and on the x-axis is time and the y-axis is what is called employment elasticity. Now, what is employment elasticity? The percentage change in employment for every 1% change in GDP, right? That's called employment elasticity. For example, India was very in the early parts of a season, you are 0.8. That means for every 1% increase in GDP, our employment grew by 0.8. As you can see, along with the US, India has reached about 0.2. This is actually based on 2009 and 11. Now I'm going to show you later data. And this is again a comparison of India's employment elasticity vis-a-vis other countries. This is actually for the period 2000-2017. Already this average has come down to 0.05. This is according to some other study, whereas some countries like South Africa is still the highest, around 0.52. And if you look at sectorally, which this is really showing you which sectors are important from the employment elasticity point of view. When you talk about labor or employment creation, you should pick those industries where the employment elasticity is high. This is an unpublished report. Myself and another friend of mine, a few of us are working together, professor from Tata Institute of Social Science. We are trying to publish this report very soon. But clearly, our EE, according to this, is already 0.16. We saw 0.21 earlier, 0.6. But actually, some more data is showing that it's becoming zero now, almost. And the post-COVID is negative, or it may not have any value. Textiles, for example, in this, textile is showing zero employment elasticity. One of the factors which many people have not understood about textiles is textile is more and more export-oriented. When you get more and more export-oriented, you're very competing on prices and global competitiveness, and therefore there is going to be a more and more demand for automation in textiles. So textile may be export-oriented, but it may not give you large amount of employment elasticity, will be zero. So 5 sectors we have to focus on: construction, health, business services, education, hotels and restaurants. They're all in the 0.5 range as per this particular study. We still are validating this study right now. So how do you grow the MSMEs? First, the new MSME definition is a very good plus. I think it's a very positive definition for development. Second, focus on those sectors where E is the highest. For example, because of COVID, one of the most high employment elasticity is restaurants and hotels. Still, the government is struggling to make up its mind to open up restaurants, and especially street side restaurants. They are a big supplier of food as well as provide a lot of jobs, and we are not opened it still. MSME should focus on expansion to global MSME scale, not necessarily global export, but our scale has to go up. Right now, the definition helps us to go up to 250 crores now. The benefits will go up to 250 crores. But worldwide, many of the MSME definitions are go as high as $100 million. It's about 600 crores, 700 crores, or 800 crores. So we need to expand our MSME scale to 800 crores. That's one. Secondly, to achieve that, I think the government has to consider tax holiday for 10 years. If you recollect, all of you recollect, the IT industry in 1991 was a very small industry. The 2 major factors changed IT industry's future. One was a tax holiday, and the second was very, very concessional land which they gave it to these sectors. Apart from that, IT industry never took any benefits, significant benefits. Similarly, if MSMEs have to grow, we need to create a tax holiday. And the second most important thing is to create a wage subsidy. We'll talk a little more about it. What it means is, and it's a very interesting concept which I published recently also on the same thing. Point is, if you are going to give a dole or we're going to direct cash transfer to young people, instead of giving them the money and they're idling at home, give the same money to an employer And that gap will be the wage gap between what he can afford to pay and what is the expectation of salary. That will bring him to work, because the employer can add another 10,000 rupees of his own salary. Supposing you say 5,000 is the wage subsidy, I'm giving a cash transfer. I give another 10,000 rupees, the same 5,000 I paid wage subsidy, 10,000 rupees employer pays, 15,000 salary he can pay. So the individual gets 15,000 rupees cash in hand to spend. It becomes productive investment. At the same time, the MSME sector becomes suddenly attractive from many reasons. We'll talk about it later. So we need to offer low-cost capital and debt. Today, the equity market and the debt market is anti-MSME because of, obviously, the solvency ratios are low. We understand that. MSME should become the supplier for large Indian companies who in turn will export. I am not very confident MSMEs can export. Some of them will, but majority of them will still have to be part of the supply chain, both in India and abroad. But ideally, Indian companies, we'll have to look at more and more export houses, more and more companies which will go on India, become an export, and they will have the capacity to manage multiple currencies, multiple languages, etc., etc. So export houses also, we need at least 10 years, like in IT, what in IT got the incentive. So that is on MSME. Second is on export of manpower. I think many of us have forgotten the fact that if manpower is not exported to Middle East, Kerala would have been in deep trouble. It would have been burning because the entire Kerala economy runs on export of manpower to the Middle East, right? And this export of manpower has also saved India many times because they brought in foreign remittances in time to hold our currency in the right place. Now, why do we need to export? Already we talked about it, 13.4 million people are, every year we need to create, GDP cannot grow fast enough. And therefore, if you are going to finally look at any which way, we cannot create jobs in India for all these people. GDP growth cannot be that much adequate. So the only option is for us to export manpower. Now, how can we do that? And there are two models. I've developed something called a bifocal model. The bifocal model, basically what it says is that you cannot export young, untrained manpower. So you need to export experienced manpower who learn foreign languages. They will also get a foreign certification, and you will export them into a very specific staffing enterprise. We are talking about creating, Government of India investing 1,000 crores to create an Indian engineering skill staffing agency. If you recollect, TCS was one of the first staffing agency in India, the global staffing agency in IT in the 1990s or late 80s, and therefore the staffing industry led to a lot of improvement in terms of other companies coming in. So we need to create a engineering staffing skills agency of a large scale. It should be in a PPP model with private sector running it. It should be the equivalent of TCS in 20 years from now in terms of market cap and valuation. So what will you do? You will export experienced people from companies and replace them from Indians who are already getting skilled and joining the same companies at the entry level. So let me explain this. Supposing we assume that anybody with 4 years of experience will export. So every young person in India will get an apprenticeship program or in some kind of skilling and join a company in the first year. So the company will have a workforce of year 1, year 2, year 3 employees. Year 4 employees will exit and year 0 employees will come and join. So this is the pipeline you're creating of engineering exports of workforce. And this can be done, definitely is achievable. We have done in IT industry. But this requires, at least as I said, 2 things are required. One, you have to speak the foreign language. We need to learn Japanese, Spanish. Yesterday, 2 days ago, I was speaking to K.T. Ramarao, and I was telling him the same thing for Telangana government should do the same thing. We have still not recognized the importance of learning a foreign language if you want to export manpower. And learning a foreign language is very difficult at the later stage. It has to be at the school level. Our education policy doesn't talk about it, but I think we need to seriously look at that. Foreign language. And second is, during the 4 years the employees are in the employer service, they will pick up an international certification. Our skill certification of India is not valid. It has no validity. It doesn't have productivity focus. So these people will not only gain 4 years of experience, but also be able to get a global certification to export in countries. So this is the model. This is model. How does it work? I'm not going to spend time on this, but basically it's exclusively for engineering skills workmen. It will be for people who are diploma holders. Even engineers can part of this, and especially on the field, including plumbers, various kinds of skills. We talk about aging population in Europe and Japan. This is a great opportunity. The third part is minimum wages. This is an area including FICCI, CII, nobody wants to talk about it. I think that, like I showed you last time, the wages have been, the labor has been completely compromised. They've been exploited for a variety of reasons, but the biggest factor has been supply being more than the demand. So today, skilling is not attractive. Nobody wants to go for skilling because the salary they get, they can't save money. So the revised minimum wages, the government has already announced a code of wages. They're talking about revising minimum wages. All the lobbies are against it, but I think we have to create a scenario where they get paid minimum wages. That will bring more and more formalization of workforce. But the downside is MSME is already struggling. How will they pay the higher salary, minimum wages? So you need a wage subsidy is also an essential component to compensate the minimum wage increase. So it should be, already the government of India started this about a few years ago, 2018. He announced a program called PMRPY, where the employer's 12% contribution was paid directly to the employer by the government of India. So this is extend the scheme for another 5 years. And the last one, fourth one, is kill bureaucracy. I think this is very important. The single most reason why I think our country has not gone forward has been that lack of understanding that entrepreneurs are in the center of India's economic universe. Now, if you look at Singapore, if you look at China, anybody who has done business in China will tell you how much the government adjusts, aligns to what the industry wants to do, what the entrepreneurs want to do. Of course, I understand there is a need for genuine entrepreneurship, there is fraud entrepreneurship, but we cannot paint everybody in the same brush. So I think a post-economic revival cannot be done by the government. And I think this is a message we are trying to get across to all government officers. But unfortunately, bureaucracy is too entrenched. They believe they can press a button and the economy will come back to normalcy. The entrepreneurship are the only people who take the risk of their entire savings of life, entire future, by starting and restarting businesses. They earn their income, they pay the GST, they pay the corporate taxes. So the entire government revenue, 90% of the revenue comes from various forms of taxes paid by enterprises and individuals. Now, with this comes the entire economy, the ability to take care of the poor comes from the fact that enterprises have to run. So I think this is the last recommendation I have, that we need to change our mindset. The suspicion about entrepreneurship, their cheats, the stories which you get in the paper of 25 people running away from the country with the money, they cannot be the basis of extrapolation. For employers, very quickly, I'm going to run. These are the questions for employers. So Rob, I think I can do two things. I can stop here and then come back to this question. What do you think?
Okay, carry on.
All right. Okay. So the future of human capital management, I think how your organizations will change from the standpoint of employee. Flexibility will become very important. In the past, we have always focused on efficiency. Flexibility means I must be able to give work from home. I must be able to provide flexible compensation. I must be able to increase my manpower and reduce my manpower instantly. All this will come only when you get a lot more external talent. The ratio of internal talent to external talent will change dramatically. Second, predictability will become critical, because what is happening now, most of our dashboards all tell us what is happening right now. It doesn't tell you what will happen tomorrow. So all organizations have to build predictable dashboards rather than just dashboards of the past. Thick data, which is the basis of predictability, is becoming important. Unfortunately, HR data is not very reliable. It is also disjointed. It is not properly curated. But we have challenges on thick data. And measurement and modeling will be the key of human capital management. First challenge, 9 types of employment arrangements will happen in the future. Already they're talking about in US, and maybe 10 years from now, only 9% of the workforce will be full-time on the job. Majority of the people will be in a variety of job roles, and the job roles will be partly full-time, partly there are things like, how they are paid. One is on compensation model. Either you paid on time, or you are paid on output, or you paid on part-time basis. So with 9 types of models are going to come, and companies have to manage with all the models, right? Companies will start driving more and more project-based work teams. It is not going to be hierarchical, functional. We used to talk about business structures, SBU structure. We used to talk about structures of functional structure. But the third type of structure is going to be the future, is project-based structure. People will be in project teams. They will be in short-term projects, mid-term projects. They will be working on contributions, will be basis of outcomes and salaries. So these are the, if project teams come to work, then leadership itself has to ask, what will leadership bring to the table? That's a question we need to ask. You as a leader has to ask, what will you bring to the table? when the project teams are self-contained. They have the resources, they have a goal, they have the teams, they have a compensation structure. Then what will you bring to them? Why would they talk to you? Third, 4 generations of manpower. As we go into more and more scenarios of expertise, we will have people at 65 and people all the way up to 19 and 20. We need to manage 4 varieties, the kind of attitudes, their kind of generations will work in the company. How are you going to manage them? Historically, now if you look at HR, it's driven by one set of generations at the top management and everybody listens to them. The future is going to be the other way around. Younger people will dominate, older people will dominate. The middle management, which is all in the 40-45 age group, their values, their existence will be under question, and therefore their views on what should be, how to handle the generations will be very, very suspect. And learning will change dramatically from company driven to employee driven. So even earlier we used to talk about compensation structure where the people were given a budget for training and they were asked to allocate that money. It never took off. But I think times have come now. The compensation will include a package for learning and the employees will have to choose what they want to learn. And most importantly, employees have to supplement or pay 100% of the learning themselves. 7 mega trends for the post-COVID future for the employees now. We talked about employers. 7 trends are important. 1, full-time in-office jobs will go. Gig jobs and work from home are here to stay. Second, employment meets prosperity. This is an assumption we used to assume. It's no longer true. Saving leads to prosperity, not salary. You get any amount of salary, but we have to cut our expensive lifestyles. We have to cut early investments in property. For example, when our generation, many of us bought our houses and cars much later. The current generation have invested early and they're all with EMIs. Large companies and big investments means large attractive jobs. MSMEs will become more attractive to work going forward. The COVID is already done. Many large companies are struggling more than the nimble MSMEs. So I think the employer of choice will change from large companies to MSME and startups. So you should look at, if you're a young person, you should look at MSMEs and startup more seriously now. But they must be agile and they must be really forward thinking. And salary growth will not be continuous. Historically, every time we used to ask, what's my increment? What's the salary year on year? Salaries can go up and down. There will be 3 components in salary: fixed, incentive, and variable. All of them will change. I know for some time ago, I heard about Japan, and they were talking about Japanese, the salary goes to a peak and then starts coming down as you age. So the assumption that every year my salary will go up will no longer be valid. Career growth means continuous title growth. That means I'll get promoted. This model is also going to die. We are going to see more of lateral movements. Second career starts mean take a dip in salary, dip in career. All this are going to be reality. Good career means no break in careers. That is also not possible. You will lose a job before finding the next job. So you must carry some cushion of money. You must be working on your skill development parallelly, because if you lose a job, if you're not ready for the next job, at that time, the only value you bring to the table are your skills. And the skill upgradation has to happen. And learning will be at employee cost. So these are the 9 models I talked about, which is basically time-based, location-based, and where the payment models are. So these are the 9 things I talked about earlier. Thank you, Turab.
Thank you.
My God, it's about 50 minutes now. A lot of time I spent. Okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. So Murli, you can stop sharing your screen.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please go ahead.
So Murli, excellent presentation. Very impressive what you talked about. So middle management and middle level is going to vanish, not only in India, but all over the world. Gig economy is what is going to be there. Yeah. But I couldn't understand, how are you able to get Indian people to go abroad? How can we export manpower when people are physically going to be, other than manual workers, other than construction workers or people working in a factory, nobody is required. They can work anywhere in the world. You can work remotely. So I don't see any need for exporting manpower. Second, I don't see the possibility of creating jobs in urban markets, even to the extent of 20% of what people have migrated. So I think we have to look at how to get jobs or create entrepreneurial talent in the clusters, in smaller towns and villages. And otherwise, there is no hope of employment for 75% of them.
Dr. Murli is speaking somewhere from Manisha's empathy.
Go ahead, Murli.
There is a positive patient in 301 Tower 8.
Tower 8.
Yeah. Answer one question of Ajay. Basically, how do you export manpower? Jobs are not coming from home. People can work from wherever they are in the world. These are jobs are basically in the area of personal services. When you talk about aging population, for example, plumber, you cannot be remote working on plumber. Right? So we are talking about personal services, home services. This is going to be the export opportunity, not necessarily engineering, design, architecture. That is what the kind of jobs we are looking at. That is why local languages are very essential. They have to speak a local language because they will be interfacing with local population. The challenges in terms of their integration and integration with the local population. And that is why we said that we need to be in staffing roles so that they can come back to India like they happened in Middle East on contract basis, they'll work and come back. So Indians cannot work abroad like the way we worked in US anymore. All countries are going local. They will not allow foreigners to stay in their country for long when there are job challenges for themselves. So there will be some sectors will open up, which are basically personalized services, what we call. And these services cannot be done from home or some other place to be work in situ. And that's where I'm talking about the policy.
Okay. Murli, this is Vijay here.
Murli, you didn't answer my question on the jobs to be created in the clusters.
I'm coming to that. Yeah. See, I think I've not presented the migration data. I think India is a migrant country, right? Largest number of migrants are women than men. Number one. I think I don't want to show you that because I've done some research in that area. So for a person, migration means going out of the village, whether he goes to a same district, neighboring district, same state, outside the state, the cost of living is the same. So in my mind, your idea is absolutely valid. Where should the jobs be created? Obviously, the jobs will be created today. For example, if you ask India, if you stand as we speak now, industries in doldrums, you cannot get new investment is not going to come from anybody. Most of the Indian entrepreneurs are not investing money. Foreign investors are still going to buy some time because they're not decided where they want to invest and their own capability to invest is less. Now, the only way we can increase the employment now is to go for infrastructure projects. These infrastructure projects will be on highways, various kind of other projects like power, etc. we do, and they will all be in clusters. So obviously, the whole model which we are going to happen, our migrant labor are not going to come back to the same place where they left from. They're going to go to the nearest place where they can find jobs. So obviously, I agree with you, Ajay, that I think the job creation model in going forward will not be the urban, city-oriented model. The service sector will still be in cities. As long as the demand for services are there, they will be there. But looking at infrastructure, looking at manufacturing, we'll get more distributed. But as I said earlier, the real employment are in the service sector. Large number of jobs in service sector. Service sector jobs will be created where the demand for services are, which is still urban. So we will have a mix of both.
Okay. Anybody else can unmute themselves and ask?
Yeah, Murli, this is Vijay here. My question is, there is a linkage between education system and the people available for this with the right skills for the knowledge to be in the jobs. Now, we have to look at the current education system is so poor. I mean, we see the quality of education is so poor. People, even after passing out from colleges, and they don't have cognitive intelligence to really do even the primary jobs. I mean, primary kind of competencies. So if you're talking about job creation and skills, I think we need to really look at in the backward linkage also, which is very important. I think nobody's really talking about it. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. No, in fact, I think the education policy, the recently Government of India announced National Education Policy, and they are talking about linkages. But the fact is, and I think I'm being a little controversial here, there is no data to show that unless you go to an education system like UK or the EB kind of model where people do things, they learn by doing things. Any road-based learning has never ever succeeded in providing the right skills for any employment. So India, if you have to change that system, we have to do two things. One, we should increase the apprenticeship program significantly. Right from class 10, children have to be in some kind of apprenticeship, maybe retail store, maybe in a factory. We need to encourage, incentivize. Only by doing a job, only by seeing the reality of the job, people learn. So that is my point number one. Secondly, I agree with you, the education system has to improve. But my problem is your primary education and secondary education is completely screwed up by the government. But the government regulatory system, the government, they set up the largest number of people in the government schools. The government teachers are paid the highest, except for Delhi, which I hear some positive stories about Delhi government. But by and large, the government school system has failed. So where do you start? As it is, I'm struggling with 6 million and 8 million, a number of children who are born, 23 million, 30 million children enrolled in primary school right now, per year. So if you look at the 150 million children are in primary schools, that's a huge problem. We can address it, but where is the economics? The education policy also finally came back. Prime Minister returned the entire national education policy document back to the HRD ministry saying, where is the money? Any reforms in education cost huge amount of money. The only way they can do that is to privatize, promote private education, regulate the prices in a serious level, which they can afford to pay. And Indian families will invest on children's education more than they invest on themselves. That data is already available in lower income families. So I agree with you, but I think the problem is much, much, much bigger than what we are talking about right now, employment.
Thanks.
I think Mr. Murli, good.
Yes.
Hello. Mr. Murli, good morning. This is Manupriya from Tempest. So I think I quite agree with what you say, and I think the answer also, one answer to this education is promoting more on vocation aspect of it, rather than that theory part of it. And that is where I feel the priority should be of the government, which has not been there so far.
You are right. See, the problem is practical learning. There is a worldwide learning models have all changed now, which is Carnegie Mellon introduced it sometime as early as 2000. It's called learning by doing. So the entire learning models in India have to go upside down. In Udbhav school, where we are talking about action learning and doing a task, children have to do tasks to learn something. Now, unless we bring that in the schooling system, and that puts a lot of pressure on the teachers. The teachers are not ready to evaluate action learning, because there's a huge degradation of outcome from students. See, objective type paper is easy to set, easy to correct. But if you give an open-ended essay to children to study, teachers go off the rocker. So we need to really look at practical learning, learning by doing, self-learning, peer learning, what we call action learning. All this should be built rather than instructor-led learning, which is the current learning model. But as far as the vocational training is concerned, it's a bigger problem. It is not attractive. None of our children we would recommend to go for a diploma course. I don't think anybody in this audience will send their child to join a diploma course because the skilling is important.
So by vocation, I only meant that skill set, that experience.
I agree with you.
Another thing, Mr. Murli, when we talk about MSME and their contribution in the economy, where do you see? I mean, in terms of infrastructure sector, I am sure. I mean, you are a better judge, but I think infrastructure sector MSME may not be able to invest at this point of time. But what with anti-China sentiment in the industry today and people shunning Chinese products, and also, do you see there is a market for MSME there?
See, I think India is an economic society. We stopped smoking because they put a penalty of 1,000 rupees on smoking. I don't think we have a national fervor. I think all these storylines are coming in WhatsApp, coming in all kinds of storyline. I have no belief. Indians will go where the money is, where their profitability is. So they might suspend it for 3 months because they want to look good. But ultimately, when the banana is cheaper by 1 rupee by Chinese banana, we'll buy Chinese banana.
So I quite agree with you, because today morning only I was discussing with somebody that today you plan to buy a laptop. You cannot buy a laptop without any Chinese intervention in any of it. May not have been produced, but some part of component of it would still be produced.
But what government is saying is actually making sense. What they are saying is not about anti-China. It's about India coming into the global supply chain. You can't be in a global supply chain of all products and services. You can only be in certain products and certain services. For example, we can look at pharma industry, APIs to some extent. So I think there is an understanding now that we can't go against China, but what we need to do is to align ourselves in terms of what the opportunities are coming. But MSME sector is not global. We are very, very low in capacity to take a loss. So how Chinese companies are supported by huge amount of bank loans, low interest rates, anti-labor laws. So there are many, many reasons. So if India thinks that we can beat China and take over China's market, I think then there's something wrong with us.
Oh, exactly. I mean, just by deleting TikTok from our mobiles, we cannot.
Yeah. Okay. I think, Murli, we are almost coming to the end of the session. I have just one last question, since I am moderating this, I'll take the right to ask you the last question. See, all this unemployment, etc., which we are facing right now, will we see social unrest on the streets of India ever?
See, I think it's a mystery, Turab. I think the migrant labor has been a great learning experience for me because you've insulted approximately, maybe in my estimate, anywhere between 1 crore to 3 crore people. We insulted them. You stayed in a locality, people not giving them houses. They want to throw them out of the houses. We've not given them food. They stood on the roads. They stood in queue for the train, but they've not revolted. If I was in that position, when I came from Bihar to work in Telangana, and Telangana, the labor contractor came and told me a story. I came here and now I'm suffering. My first response is to go against the system. So I think India is a remarkable country because the tolerance for injustice, accepting injustice and tolerating living injustice is very high among the poor people. But having said that, I think we are pushing them to the limits of this. The two trends are visible to Rab. One is what you can see in the hospital, doctors being beaten up, which is absolutely unfair. I don't think anybody has the right to touch the doctor, but it is coming out of a real frustration when they are being treated as a separate class of people when they come into hospital, when they realize they're not getting the connection. Second one is villagers, whether it is seed industry or fertilizer industry, they're going and bashing all the people in the chain. For example, dealers, when we were in seed business, Turab, you remember, dealers used to be the target if a seed is coming or seed shortage is there. So farmers are becoming more militant. The rural population where majority of people live, they're becoming more militant. Migrant labor goes back into that community and they're going to find there are not enough economic opportunities. What will happen? I don't know. I only hope that we don't get into that situation, but it is possible. It is just a power keg. You can light the power keg and I don't know what will happen.
Yeah, Mr. Turab, I have a question. Hello.
Yeah.
Now we can continue if you don't mind.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, no Mr. Murli, I am Varun here. I am basically a consultant working for my company. So I wanted to know, there are a lot of HR consultants which have opened their office and all, but nobody is focused on ever training any people. Okay. The soft skill training or any specific training related to the rail and metro or infrastructure side. So there is not much of training courses which any company thinks of. So can we think of that in that line or in that sector of training and all?
Yeah, I'll answer that because we are also in training business.
Yeah.
TMI Group is in training.
Yeah.
The problem with training in India is that who's going to pay for it?
Yeah. Okay.
Individuals are not willing to pay. You ask yourself, how much money have you spent to train yourself in the last 20 years?
Yeah, maybe 1,000 or something.
Exactly. So if you on a car, you spend a maintenance of 8%, right? On your house, you spend money on the maintenance, but the asset wise, all the asset is you, and we don't spend even 1% of the money on assessment, on your own self-development. Okay. So the training has not picked up because individuals are not willing to pay. On top of it, government entered the skill sector, offered free training, and screwed it up upside down. Today's skill sector is in complete disarray because they offered free training, no quality, no accountability, whatever they did. So consequently, training will change. What is what I said? Going forward, people have to spend their own money from their pocket to learning for themselves. In that case, quality will go up. People will choose what they want to learn, and that is the good side. Okay. That's the reason.
Thank you.
TM, good morning. This is Amarnath.
Yeah, good morning, Amarji.
Yeah, I have a question. Very good. First of all, let me congratulate you. A lot of work must have gone behind your presentation. A very wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
Now, coming to this MSME and related employment, I'm in service sector and I am an MSME. When finance minister was going on giving that 20 lakhs, I was very eagerly looking at something will come for this MSME. Except for enhanced loans, nothing seems to have really came forth for this. Particularly, every entrepreneur has a loan component, working capital, from maybe 1 crore, 10 lakhs, 1 crore, 10 crores, whatever. And 3 months continuously, if there is no billing and it's got shut down, and how do you expect the entrepreneur to hold these employees? So what are your thoughts on that? Is it not unfair on the part of government doing that? Something actually, in fact, they're holding the TDS amounts also.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to hear from
I'll
you.
explain that. Yeah. I think the question, and I think you're absolutely right, Amar Garu, is fundamentally the government has not understood the difference between liquidity and solvency. When we say solvency, what we mean is the unit viable? If you are down for 3 months of income, is zero, and even though you reduced your cost to some extent, your costs are correctly going into a loss for the 3 months, and you have no capacity to bear a loss. Two things we need to do. One, provide liquidity to restart, which is what they have done. They've given us all some additional working capital limit, which the limit is mainly useful for restarting your business because you need to fund it. The second part is solvency. Solvency means the loss which I have incurred, unless the loss is written off, I cannot survive. And that is why we talked about a wage subsidy. Worldwide, what the other countries have done is that they have decided to give money to the employers towards the salary cost and any other cost that they waived some of the rent, like for example, rental, GST. Many benefits have been given to reduce the losses to zero, not increase the liquidity. If you increase the liquidity without reducing the losses, liquidity means more interest payment, you'll become more insolvent and you become more bankrupt. I think all the banks know this problem. The banks are realizing that by giving more money to a company that has made 3 months of losses and they cannot come out, you give them this money, they'll take this money also, nothing will happen. They'll run away with that money also. So what you said is right. The government has not understood. This is what I said, bureaucracy has failed this country because they have never understood the difference between liquidity and solvency.
Yeah.
That's the point. Thank you.
Hi Murli, this is Shastri here from Intense.
Yes.
A great presentation, Murli.
Yeah.
I just wanted to see, what are the methods? It's a good point you made that, in India we have that learning can only happen on the job, and we don't have, the apprentice mode or the real learning. Yeah. What can encourage that? Because finally, on-job training is what is a good learning.
See, I think two things are happening already, Shastri Garu. One part is clearly that online learning, or what we call as now digital learning, is going to be split up into 4 components. The classroom training, what we used to do, used to call people to the classroom, whether it's school or college. You will only teach them, some teacher will teach something, you'll prepare for some exam and you write. This is the model. In the digital model, this is not going to work because teachers cannot hold attention of children far away. They cannot teach the way they taught 5 hours or 6 hours in classroom. So what they have to do, they have to teach, show some videos, ask some questions, make the children do some homework, give them some project work, and they will have to come back and present the project in the group. It's called peer learning and social learning. So the entire, thanks to this digital learning model, all this will come into play because you cannot continue the instructor-led training anymore. That model is dead. Okay. That's so by God's grace, I think we are going to move our school. For example, Udbhav School, it's a very poor school. We run by IIM Ahmedabad alumni. We're already talking about blended learning model for our children going forward.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks.
Hi, Murli, this is Anand Jambolkar. How are you?
Very well, Anand. Nice to hear your voice.
Great. So, you've spoken of entrepreneurship, you've spoken of MSMEs, absolutely correct. Both of us are, are entrepreneurs, and we have seen our ups and downs, and, we are very, very familiar with that. Now, why cannot we look at the China model of growth, unemployment, education, and they have succeeded like nothing else, in the sense they are a template of, for a country like us, where they have taken out people, out of poverty, out of, and today they are rubbing shoulders with US, and very, very soon probably they'll surpass the US. So, there are many models to learn from that. I don't know whether you have looked at the China model, but again, I think somewhere you mentioned about the secondary and the tertiary sector being the pillar, right from, it's a joke, but when the PM says samosa becho, so those are the kind of things which probably come to mind. But just, putting the question to you, have you looked at that model or anything that we can take away from that?
See, I think we have to study, interestingly, China model, the Singapore model too. Fundamentally, our biggest challenge is India got democracy ahead of time. We are not ready for democracy. After 70 years, we have failed miserably in democracy. And our pillars of democracy, basically executive, legislature, and most importantly, judiciary, has failed us. The judiciary has stood up. Today, there are two problems with judiciary. One, suddenly they stand up for individual rights and then shut down all coal mines, they shut down all telecom licenses because they think there is something going wrong against one person's interest. On the other side, we have not been a responsible democracy. We have created, today the cost of our elections are the highest. The MP spends 50 to 100 crores per constituency. So consequently, the reason why we cannot adopt the model of China is our democracy and our and the constitution, which allows judiciary to interfere into the executive role. So for example, China made some decision, for example, banking system. You look at the banking system in China, it's a doldrums. If anybody goes deep into the banking system of China, they'll realize that many of the banks are not solvent. For example, the way they manage COVID. We don't know anything about China. Post-COVID, we don't know anything what's happening. They will decide what people should know, what they will know. So our, maybe it's a liability, maybe it's an asset, I don't know. But we cannot adopt the Chinese or Singapore model because they're all driven by the belief that people have to become mature to handle democracy. And China may become a democratic country maybe 10 years from now, and they do a better job than what we've done in India. So we cannot adopt it from that standpoint because we need to be driven by center. Even center-state relationship in India is a constitutional issue. You're already seeing state government of Telangana making a different view than central government. They're disagreeing, they're taking away the powers. So our constitution is a liability in the way it has been built right now to adopt China model. I'm not saying China model is the only way, but if you want to change dramatically in short time and bring the per capita GDP. See, India's GDP is growing, per capita is not growing. We're way in the bottom. If you want to change that, then we need to completely change our political system. And we need to really look at reforms at the judiciary, bureaucracy, and the political. All the three must happen to change our future.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's not an easy answer, but that's the truth.
Murali, hi, Anilya.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, you had mentioned about service sector in your presentation, which was number one. That today with this COVID, service sector is hit.
Anil, can you keep your microphone closer?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Pick up your microphone.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'm saying service sector has been hit very badly.
Yeah.
If you see tourism, subsectors of it, travel, hotel, restaurants, and they being high employers, where do you see that sector now? I mean, employing people.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely right. Tourism is one of the largest employers of non-graduate segment in India, like construction is. So the other day, KTR also came in one session and we were talking and he was saying something. See, what is the problem with tourism, hospitality, etc. is the perception, threat perception of COVID is very high. Now, the narrative today in COVID is on about how not to contract COVID. So wear the mask, social distancing. Now, more and more you talk about it, more is the fear of getting contracted with COVID. And therefore, even if you open up your restaurants, people will not go to restaurants. So to change that, the government has to change the narrative to talk about what happens after you get COVID. 85-90% of the people already, number of people who are discharged from hospitals have increased. Many people have survived on home quarantine. There are a lot of positive stories. The narrative has to change from pre-COVID to post-COVID infection. And we need to believe, all of us in this room have to believe that we will survive if we get COVID. Then only we'll go out. Otherwise, don't bring maid, don't bring the servant, don't do this. How long can you live like this? It doesn't make any sense. The servant also need to survive. At the end of the day, you stop the servant. How will the servant survive? So effectively, we need to change the narrative. And I think India, Prime Minister has realized it. The state government is also, he also said, KTR said, yeah, I agree with you. But his point is, we have to change the perception. Then only we'll travel. Today you won't go by air, you won't go by train, you won't go by bus, because you've been told that if you get contracted, God help you. In reality, it is not true. There's no data to believe that if you get COVID, you will die. I at least know somebody in our CEO club, he's got COVID. I mean, the first person I know very closely, and is going through some recovery process right now. And some of the fear of this thing is going away because we know somebody close to us has got it and is recovering. So these industries will survive only if we change the narrative to more positive storytelling about post-COVID, what happens to you.
Okay, I think
Good afternoon. I have a question.
Okay. Murli, are you okay with this?
Yeah, I'm okay, Turab. I think I always love this question. I'm sorry I spoke too much.
No, that's okay.
Okay, good afternoon, Murli. It was nice presentation. Myself, Sanjay, I'm a HR consultant. So I like to see in your slide you mentioned about gig economy. So how in India it will move fast and what is going to enhance the market?
Yeah, so actually there is some data published on the worldwide. India is already leader in gig economy. The number of employees in the gig workers worldwide. India is, I think, right in the top 2 or 3. Now, what does it mean? Gig economy means what? There are two things has to happen. One, the guy who gives out the job should have absolute clarity on what outcome he wants, how he's going to measure it, and how he's going to pay you. The guy who's coming in should have complete clarity on how he'll execute the job and deliver the job and collect the money. Now, two things are happening because of COVID now. First, you don't have to sit in an office and get the job done. So I can get it done anywhere else. That's a big plus for gig economy. The second is companies are realizing I can't afford to have permanent employees. Because if I have permanent employees, my income is uncertain. It is going to take at least 1 year to recover. So more and more companies will push some of their own employees into gig working or outcome-based or output-based income, which they can work from home. So the gig working has been completely accelerated by the COVID. And I think we are going to see even HR consultant like you and me, we'll all be looking for people who can come and work on gig model, for hiring people or getting in connection with gig workers will be a priority. Job sites like Naukri will have to go more into gig workers who are working for part-time or flexi time or gig working kind of people will come into the market. So I think the market is being made. India is already a pioneer and we will see that very quickly in the next 2 to 3 years. I think at least in my mind, in our company at least, we are very sure we will see at least 20%, 25% of our employees in gig. So that's going to be the reality.
Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, Mr. Murli. My name is Colonel Chandel and I am working for NSDC. Firstly, it's a lovely presentation and I happen to be heading the SMIS at national level, that is Skill Management Information System, trying to make the supply meet demand or vice versa. So what is one of the biggest issue we have seen, and you're very rightly connected that there are going to be almost 30 million migrant labor. We have already crossed the figure of capturing 1.3. One of the biggest challenge you find that the entire labor is looking for an assurance, and not all, almost the survey we have done that they are looking for accommodation, they are looking for place to stay. So if you look at the logistics sector, which is on high demand, and as far as the health sector, if you look at the logistic houses, they are almost lakh square feet out at the outskirts of the Noida where I am, but there's not even a single person staying accommodation there. So this is one of the challenges. So do you think there is somewhere our MSMEs or something can start thinking, if you have a captive labor, if you have a place for a labor to stay, because all villages don't create accommodation for people to go and work in a neighborhood. So there is a big problem, and their returning has become a big question. We are looking at it. Most of them say that post Chhat, they will start moving, but there is a portion of people who have already started moving, but there is an assurance that you will be accommodated, you will be looked after. So that's one of the biggest challenge at the moment. So yeah, this needs to be
answer to this, Colonel. I think the answer to this is already there, staring at our face. If you look at the Middle East model, all workers stay in encampments around the work area. They are given food, so the entire money they save. See the concept. Many people have not understood why workers are insisting. I spoke about it briefly. Why they are insisting on these benefits is because they need to save money at the end of the day. If I get a salary and I pay the salary in transportation, in stay, in terms of food, then I don't make money. Then why am I working? I work in Manrega and sit at home and work for 2 hours a day, smoke a BD and enjoy my life. Why would I come to the migrant worker?
That's right.
Fundamentally, the narrative has to change from salary to savings. Companies must say, you will save this money if you work with me. Not, I will pay you this much salary. That means once they start talking about the narrative, then they will try and cut the saving component, which is accommodation, food. For example, in the Middle East, for example, if you live in a group, people don't have fancy accommodation. They all live in dormitories. In China, I think he talked about, Anand asked about China. China is also a dormitory model. So I think fundamentally we have to change the narrative from saving to saving from compensation. Second, and I think I propose this idea to NSDC, even government of MSME Ministry, we have to create skill hostels. See, it is a fact that majority of people are migrating because in the village, 63% of the Indian population is rural India, which means they live in the villages. If they have to move out, it doesn't matter where you live, you need accommodation, right? Even if you live in a district headquarters, you need accommodation. We need to convert government land. A lot of government land is available. They have to provide long-term lease for government land on lease for private entrepreneurs to come and set up skill hostels on dormitory basis. Only then you will see, for example, students, when they go and study, when they migrate and study for education, they all stay in dormitories. Very low cost, right? Because they're spending from their pocket. It's not paid from anybody else.
Very rightly, very right. Very right.
To create dormitory structure, the most expensive part of dormitory structure is land. Government has so much of land and they can give a long-term lease. They give it a long-term lease for schools in Delhi where it started because the government gave the land to schools to set up the infrastructure. But we're not providing school accommodation for or land to build to private sector for skill hostels. So we need to do that and bring the narrative to employers to saving. And I think this will happen.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I think we have stretched quite a lot, Murli, your time, and also all the participants. What I must also comment is that normally by the end of the discussion, we have hardly around 40% people remaining. But here I find that almost 60%, 70% are still on the net. So that shows that the talk was very interesting. So, and in case there are no further questions, may I request my colleague Manupriya, if she is still there, to please propose a vote of thanks.
I'm here only. Thank you so much, Mr. Murli, for sharing such informative statistics and your progressive thoughts on bringing the economy back on track. So it was really interesting listening to you. I had logged off for some time because of unstable internet, and then I thought I'll log in again because I didn't want to miss anything today. So thank you so very much, and thank you all the participants today for spending the morning with us. So on behalf of everybody at Tempest, I would like to thank Mr. Murli and of course all of you for making this so interactive.
I would say thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Turab, I just want to say one of the most beautiful presentations and filled with data and very courageous presentation, I must say. I loved it.
Thank you. Thank you, Rajan.
For those who do not know, that was Rajan Nair. He's the person who created the Complete Man campaign for Raymond's.
Yeah, and I was missing his questions today. No question from you.
No, I was completely enthralled. I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. Absolutely.
Okay, so
thank you so much.
And we hope to meet you guys, all of you all, again in Open Minds 12. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot, Murli and Tarun.